Hey everybody, excited to talk with Donovan today about our February featured coffee from Jairo Quinones. Jairo is one of our longest standing coffee partners. Donovan, I think it's a really lovely coffee.
Thanks. Yeah,
You're not actually drinking it.
No, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, false
What?
flag.
Take down the third wall here. You did though today.
Yeah, no, I already had a full cup this morning. I've probably had it about 100 times leading up to today.
Great.
That's usually how it works.
What do you love about this coffee?
Yeah, a lot of different things. One, it's our longest, one of our longest standing, relationships.
Yeah.
It's by far one of the most fulfilling coffees we have to roast. So it's really exciting to bring it back. But the thing I love about it, just taste-wise, it's really acidic, but really balanced, and it has a really lovely body. So it's really easy to drink. It contrasts really nicely with base camp too.
Yeah, felt like you were pandering to me a little bit because it was the first coffee I sourced directly, but also you're very well aware that pink grapefruit is my favorite tasting note, and that's the first tasting note in the bag. So when I walked into the cafe this morning, it felt like it was just like a message to me that was like you dropping little Easter eggs that you're thinking about me.
That's exactly what it was,
Okay.
100%.
So, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Factually, Jairo Quinones comes from the small town of Pitalito, Colombia. It's in the region of Huila. We first met Jairo in January of 2016 at the Best of Huila coffee competition. We'd been roasting only for 7 months, and we were judges on a jury, and Jairo's coffee was ranked the 7th in Colombia, and so we bought it at a live auction. We actually split his original micro lot with Verve Coffee out of Santa Cruz, California. It was a fun punching above our weight because they were a legit company and we were just trying to hang in and act like we knew we were doing, and Lindsay, who was the Verve buyer, came to us and said, "You want to split this lot with us?" And we were like, "Yeah, that's our favorite coffee too." But it was great. And then we didn't get to meet Jairo until after we bought his coffee, but we showed back up in 2018 and he was wearing a Some Coffee t-shirt, and so cool little moment like that tells you why you start these relationships.
By far, the most fulfilling part about it is just seeing someone grow along with us. You know, it was really difficult to bring this coffee back, and we'll touch upon that later. It's very exciting to see someone grow and the quality remain, and also go along with that trajectory. It's very
Yeah, to give you some context on the history of Jairo as a coffee producer, so he's a second generation coffee farmer. His dad gave him, I think, 15 acres of
half a hectare.
Half a hectare, so I have no idea how that translates to
Yeah,
acres.
I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's a pretty small plot.
Not 15 acres.
Yeah, not 15. Yeah, no, so a very small little plot that he got from his father, Don Jairo, and then just went with it. So it was about 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you mentioned
Yeah,
that.
15. That's the number. I knew there was 15 somewhere.
No, there you go.
So when we bought Jairo's coffee in 2016, he previously had always sold his coffee on the commodity market. So the most he had ever been paid for his coffee prior to the auction was just over $1. We paid $5.50 in 2016, so that was 550% at least beyond what he had normally been paid, and so that was a huge chunk of money for him, equivalent of more than $10,000. And the cool thing about Jairo is that he immediately reinvested in his farm. Started working on his coffee trees, on his soil, on drying and processing in particular. So in 2018, fast forward 2.5 years, his coffee was awarded the best in all of Colombia, and his top micro lot. He sold that very small micro lot to a coffee roaster in Singapore for $29 a pound, which is nuts. And if the $5 a pound was life-changing money, this is becomes one of the top 0.1% of coffee producers in terms of access to resources. And he's a pretty humble guy, super quiet. And I remember they asked him, "What are you going to do with this money?" And he was like, "Well, I'll probably buy a parabolic dryer." And it was and he's just continued to see the long-term impact. And I think that is the most important part of direct relationships, is to work with people that you find them on a level where you're sort of discovering them, and then you work together and give them more money, and those people are investing in their coffee and in their family and in their community to raise everybody up and stuff. And so it's really cool to see how Jairo's coffee quality has grown, and also in turbulent times like the last 2 years, how his coffee has maintained really high qualities.
Yeah, absolutely. Despite all the delays with COVID, with logistics happenings and everything, he's still remained very dedicated to producing really high quality coffee, even at some of his lower quality, which is a little subjective,
right?
Because the cup that we're drinking, or let me paraphrase,
I'm drinking,
is delicious.
I like how you keep looking at your coffee like there's nothing in there.
Well, I just finished it.
Guys,
It's
there's
kinda
nothing in
tragic.
his cup. The interesting thing about coffee, which I'm not sure many consumers know, is that it's very similar to wine farms and vineyards in terms of different grapes are planted at different parts and plots of the land. And so, to your point, even as lower quality coffee, what it is Jairo produces several different varieties of coffee grown at different altitudes And so just like a wine might have, you know, they have their blend, or they have their base Cabernet, or they have their base Pinot, and then they have, you know, a really higher level. That's how a lot of coffee producers who have enough land and have enough skill also look at their coffee. It's not like he grows one coffee. He's growing several different coffees, and we have access to a lot of different, from his micro lot to his super micro to his more regional select coffee, all which are really tremendous.
Yeah, they're all delicious. Jairo sources or sells his coffee by varietal, so super similar to wine. So you have your Pinots and stuff like that. We buy a Caturra and Castillo. He also sells a Colombia variety. So we just buy the Caturra because we feel like it's really juicy, really sweet.
Yeah.
Got some pink grapefruit, if you will, which is a bit of a crowd pleaser, at least for some of the people that.
When you roasted this coffee, this is the third harvest that you've roasted Finca Nueva Zelandia, which is the name of Jairo's farm. What was different about this year's harvest, and what was your approach to roasting? It's also in a new machine. How did that process go for you?
Yeah. So we were kind of anxious this year just because the previous year was a bit of a bummer because there was a bit of rot, so we couldn't actually bring in Jairo's coffee. So first things first, we wanted to check the quality. We got a sample in from our partners at Cafe Import. So it was really delicious, passed our quality standards. And then the other big thing that was a big change is we had our new Mill City. So that kind of changes how we can roast coffees a lot. So the most exciting thing to me about that, I suppose, was we were able to use a lot more airflow, which usually brings out the acidity if we're kind of going with a direct approach there. We can really get into the nitty-gritty about that.
Let's get into the nitty-gritty. I want to know.
Yeah, we totally
Teach
can.
me.
Getting into that nitty-gritty. We test the moisture content on all the coffees we have.
Okay.
So that kind of tells us how it's going to roast. That's the latent energy in a coffee, if you will.
And what kind of moisture content are you looking for?
Yeah, so we always want to get usually 10 to 12%. This
Okay.
was a little high, actually. It was at 12.2. So what that tells us for our analytical coffee brains means that we're going to have to be pretty aggressive with our heat application.
Okay.
But again, with a Mill City, it's a good thing we can use both convective and conductive heat. So it's a direct heat application and an application with airflow. So using both of those pretty aggressively and a slower drum speed, we're able to roast more by airflow without kind of scorching that coffee. So by the time we started cracking, right around 380 degrees with that, it was really rolling. And did actually 2 to 3 different trial roasts. They're all really good, which is usually not the case whenever we bring a coffee.
Right, it's usually pretty clear on the cupping table, this is where we're going to go.
Yeah, we actually had to wait a week, which was really difficult. We were like, man, I just don't know which of these is better. We were split across the board. We had to actually wait until we dialed it on batch. We had every single one set up and dialed it on batch and did it blind. And that's how we actually dialed it in.
And so what was the determining factor? Was it the acidity? Was it the balance of all the factors?
Yeah, we found them all to be really approachable and good, but we wanted one that I think really spoke to your average Summit customer. So something that contrasted with Basecamp, but also had a really approachable taste profile. So we decided, the one with those really prominent notes of cola and blackberry and pink grapefruit was something that just kind of was the best expression of the coffee. It was also, at the end of the day, the most repeatable for our production team because we always want to be putting out a really solid coffee. Because it doesn't matter if I can do something crazy, but if we can't repeat it every day, kind of defeats the purpose.
Can you talk a little bit more from a sourcing perspective of the importance of relationship coffees?
So many different examples, but consistently for us being able to rely on a few different people, knowing the volume that they bring in, the quality that they bring in, and then also, internally facing, for our wholesale clients, for our cafes, pricing is a big thing as well. So usually I get a long-term heads up about any shifts, any things like that. We also usually get first dibs on availability. We might not be able to buy all of someone's coffee, but we try to buy as much as we can. So, we weren't able to buy all of Jairo's coffee this year, but we tried to buy as much as we could. So.
And our aspiration at Summit is to serve as much relationship coffee as possible, and whether that's single origins like Jairo Quinones or Rutas del Inca, which is another one of our long-standing partners, or from Katia Duke in Honduras, who you have visited, to the components of our blends. I mean, you've spent time in Guatemala visiting some of our cooperatives where we source the most of our coffee from.
Having the inside as to how the harvest is going, how processing is going, any updates on shipping, the sort of things you don't always get whenever I'm buying a spot coffee. I don't usually see anything like that. And for context, spot coffee is a coffee that has already landed in the States that we would then purchase. But again, we're trying to totally eliminate those as much as possible. So.
And I also, candidly, and it's tough to find a objective metric here, but I think there's a bit of romance to having coffee relationships, knowing it's not dissimilar from shopping at a farmer's market. Like, you can buy great meat at a grocery store, at Whole Foods, at Harris Teeter, but it also is nice to know where it comes from a transparency standpoint, but also, like, I know my farmer. And I think that's a cool thing, to be able to really feel like you understand the entire complexity of the supply chain, and there's storytelling, and you can wax poetic about the time that I was walking on these hills with Jairo, and I think there's something important about feeling extra connected to the whole process.
I think knowing where like everything that you have, or especially everything that you consume, like comes from, is like a really important thing. And I think it also just like on a more like personal level, it makes the world feel less big and like smaller in like a nice way. It makes everything feel more interconnected.
So let's talk a little bit about how the coffee supply chain, in particular in the last 12 months, has really changed how we approach coffee sourcing. I mean, so for as long as we have been importing coffee, and longer ago than that, so starting in 2015, the coffee supply chain has been very stable, very few ups and downs, predictable delivery schedules, predictable harvest dates, predictable shipping rates, etc. What has shifted in the last 15 months?
Yeah, a lot of different
other than
things.
everything.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of different things. We're on a broad scale, we're certainly seeing climate change impacts across Central and South America. Primarily in Central America, a lot of our partners there were affected.
Yeah.
Due to like Hurricane Eta. Am I pronouncing that right? Was it Eta? Correct. So that was a big one, but as well as, in Colombia in particular, if you look at the protests, those shut down the country for a really long period of time. And some of you might be familiar, I think, was it almost 1 million pounds of Excelsior grade Colombian coffee was stolen, which is very high quality, expensive grade coffee.
Stolen.
Just right out of a warehouse.
How do you steal 1 million pounds of coffee?
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. I can't figure that one out.
What do you do with it? Like,
yeah, what do you do with it? How do you sell that? Colombia also, because it's again a very large coffee exporting country, there's a lot of people that are called coyotes who buy coffee, right off of the farm. Mm-hmm. So as soon as it's in parchment, they'll buy it, they'll hand cash off. And that's actually what happened to a lot of our partners with COVID anxieties. They're like, well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to sell my coffee this year, if it's even going to make it to port, so I'm just going to sell it for cash because they need it, which is in some ways very understandable. Yeah.
That's where the relationships, the stronger relationships you have, that's where those come in, because obviously if someone like Jairo understands that he has a partner at the end who's committed to buying his coffee, then he's more comfortable holding on to that and following the process all the way through versus taking the first cash grab.
Absolutely, yeah. If you have any sort of anxiety about your partnership, that's usually how people have to kind of adjust. Mm-hmm. But this really special thing about working with Jairo is that he has remained committed to working with us and his partners since we started working with him in 2016. So.
And it's tough because the changes have been rooted in several different issues. It's not just you can say, okay, COVID slowed down the supply chain. To your point, there was a strike in Colombia. There's been several natural disasters. There's also been COVID supply chain issues and how that's impacted coffee shipping. We've talked about Peru a lot. Peru is where we source a lot of our coffee from. Shipping rates have gone up 500% since last harvest in Peru, which is just a tremendous impact on us. And that's not something we're trying to pass directly on to our end consumer. And it's been tough. It's because we've been trying to figure out how to navigate these price jumps while also making it as smooth and predictable for our customers.
So I want to be transparent. There's so many different things that affect it, and it can feel overwhelming. At the end of the day, our commitment is to continue working with the same people and growing with the same people. Those sort of things are just challenges that we have to get over, however that might be.
Totally.
So.
And I think there's a misconception, shifting gears a little bit, I think there's a misconception on how climate change is impacting coffee, because I think, 10 years ago we might have assessed, okay, the planet's getting hotter and that's what's going to, won't that make some areas more susceptible to coffee growing? And the reality is it's just shifting the climate. And so that means more natural disasters or less rainfall or more rainfall. And it's taking the predictability of something like coffee and completely erasing what you know. And I think, and so coffee producers aren't able to adjust quickly enough. Either their, coffee isn't maturing at the right time, it's not maturing at all. they're not drying it properly because they got too much rain, etc. It's really causing problems in every step of the coffee harvesting.
It also makes our projections really difficult, to be candid, because some of our partners, for example, someone we just started working with in Costa Rica, was emailing me and telling me that harvest started up to 2 months early just due to excess rainfall. So it means that you have to really stage your cherry picking for a longer period of time, which is really labor intensive, as you know, especially if you're just going to pick ripe cherry every day.
Right.
And you have to do it in different stages just to do that, like differing amounts of rainfall. It can affect quality for, you know, if you're drying any coffees on the patio, if there's too much rainfall, that can be a bit of a problem. Yeah, no, it's definitely the predictability is a little off the hook right now.
So with climate change and supply chain issues, how is Summit navigating all of the things that are being thrown at us to try to provide sort of a stable coffee business?
So we like to forecast our coffees out as far as possible. Right now we're doing at least 6 months. So that's essentially the number one thing that we do. We like to have all of our coffees forward booked for all of our major accounts and stuff like that 6 months in advance. That also gives us price stability.
Yeah.
So we're working around the commodity market, which is, you know, the thing that coffee is traded on. It's the variable that like things are affected upon every day. It's also like probably the most confusing part about coffee to most people.
Yes. And I think one of the other things that we're doing is looking at other origins where we historically haven't had a big footprint. You know, again, where Peru is somewhere we've had existing relationships, but because of not only the increase in cost, but also the unpredictability of whether the coffee is going to come. And we've talked to a lot of our partners that are like, honestly, I wouldn't count on getting the coffee from Peru, getting it when you expect to get it, that it'll be in good quality when you come. That's one of the other things that most consumers don't understand is coffee is an agricultural product. It's grown in a cherry on a tree, and freshness is paramount. And so if it's not picked at the right time, or if it sits in a shipping container for 60 days longer than it's supposed to, there's a good chance you're going to get rot, or the quality is going to plummet. And so we're looking at origins like Nicaragua and Honduras and more into Mexico, areas where we've experimented but not done a whole lot, but because of supply chain or product quality stability.
Really diversifying any places that we can take a look at, or big aspects of our current forecasting and things like that. We're taking a ton of offers right now from places that we haven't worked with, so yeah, that is absolutely a good point.
We're really excited for all of you guys, baristas, home connoisseurs, cafe customers, wholesale partners, to try Jairo. Again, one of the coffees that means the most to us personally, also just a beautifully delicious coffee. You did a really great job roasting. Stay tuned for our coffees coming up later this year.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a ton of fun ones coming out. I hope you enjoy it.